All right, hello everyone. Eric Marks here again with FindingMiddle-earth.com, and tonight I'm super excited to show you guys my first impressions on the brand new ON1 Photo RAW 2019. Now this is really exciting. I have reviewed, as most of you know, I have reviewed and given you my first impressions on every big update and big software version that they've come out with. And ON1 is a great company. They're one of those few companies that really do listen to their customers. All the new features that they add aren't decided on by some people sitting in a boardroom in some corporate office. They listen. They have a whole page dedicated to where customers can submit feedback. They really listen to what photographers want, and they answer to those solutions in software updates, just like this one. So 2019, I'm really excited about. Let me tell you why before we hop in and I show you some cool new tricks in here. Every version of ON1 previous to this, so 2018, 2018.5, 2017, all the updates that they've done, they've had great features, and my main use for ON1 Photo RAW has been their effects module. I like using ON1 as a plugin while I'm inside of Photoshop because they have some really good contrast and glow filters in their effects module. But it's never really quite fit my workflow to be used as my main RAW processor. It was still just a little bit too cluttered and slow switching back and forth between develop modules and layers modules and kind of having to wait for the image to render as you hop into all these modules. And they answered that with ON1 Photo RAW 2019. This is set up for a professional's workflow. Super excited about it. So without further ado, let's hop in and I'll show you what it looks like. All right, so here we are inside of the brand new user interface. It's definitely different. If you're an ON1 user, you'll notice some differences. It's nice and tidy and cleaned up. So without further ado, let's go ahead and select a photo here and hop into this brand new edit module. Did you see how fast that was, by the way? I just clicked edit and we're already here and set up. The nice thing about this new edit module, I call it the all-inclusive edit module because they tore down all the walls that were separating all the different modules, like the effects and the layers, and it's all just right here. It's all right here within arm's reach. It's super easy, accessible. It's all right here. It's going to make your workflow much faster with ON1, which I love that. So this is a real competitor now to be a main processor for me, and tons of people that ask me, hey, do you recommend anything that's a replacement for Lightroom and Photoshop and that I don't have to pay monthly with? Yeah, ON1 Photo RAW offers a standalone non-monthly version, and the way they have this set up with layers and effects and portrait, local, everything's right here. This can definitely be a replacement for you if you're looking to get out of the Adobe suite. Okay, so let's do some basic adjustments to this photo real quick. And before we do that, let me just zoom in and show you something. I'm kind of a stickler for how RAW processors render the images, right out of the camera here. And if you follow my blog, I do kind of software comparisons every few months and see which softwares are kind of render the best. Well, ON1 has stepped up their image rendering engine again, and it just renders everything so sharp. It's nice and colorful. The tones are soft and subtle, but everything's really nice. It just seems like it got about, don't quote me on this isn't scientific, but it seems like it got about 25% sharper or so, which means it's probably exactly on par now with Capture One, who normally renders the sharpest image. This is easily as sharp as Capture One, so this is just beautiful. By the way, I did test this with Fujifilm files as well. Same thing. It renders them super sharp, just beautiful. So let's go ahead and do some basic adjustments here, and I'll show you a couple of new things as we go along. So let's add some contrast to make things a little darker, get some mood in there. I'm actually going to take the exposure up a little bit. Okay. And I can't stand footprints in sand, especially like this when it's not like leading you to something mysterious. They're just there. So let's hop over here to the little fix tool, which is quite nice, if I'm honest. And you just drag this little red thing over the footprint, and it'll do a little algorithm, and it will get rid of it immediately. It's kind of like the content-aware thing in Photoshop, except you don't have to leave the RAW processor, and you don't have to go to Photoshop. It's just right here built in. So there you go. It says erasing object, and boom, it's just gone. So let's do the same thing to this footprint here. And it's much faster, too. I'm doing this on a almost 5-year-old computer, so you can't get a really good idea of performance on my computer. But even on my computer, with the old processor, you can see it's very fast. So there you go. All the footprints are gone. I'm happy now. Let's do a little bit of dehaze. Okay, that's good. And here's what I want to do next. I want a little bit more of a magenta tone. I can see that there's a little bit of kind of like a green color cast in the sky. I want a little bit more of a magenta warm tone in the sky, but I don't really want it in the foreground. I like how the foreground is a little bit cooler and a little bit more aqua and emerald colored for the water. I like the tones in the sand and the water, but I want this, the top third here, to be a little more magenta. So let's go ahead and use our new layers panel that's built in here. I'm so excited that this is here. This is great, having this built right into the RAW processor. Okay, so let's do this. Let's duplicate this layer. And when you do that, by the way, it'll say, when you created a layered photo, it is saved as a new non-destructive .on photo. This contains the full raw data for each layer you add. It is re-editable, blah, blah, blah. So basically what that means is that now that I've added a layer, and I can add 15 layers or 20 layers or whatever, when I'm done with this, it's going to convert my raw file into a .on photo file, which is ON1's proprietary raw file, so that ON1 knows what's going on with the history of this file. And basically what that means is that you can edit it just like any other raw file. It's not going to change anything. It's not going to lock you off inside of ON1. You can export it as a PSD or a TIFF or a JPEG or whatever you want. It's just so that ON1 can keep track of everything you do non-destructively to these layers. So super simple. It's a non-destructive workflow. It keeps these layers here until you tell it not to, which is great. Okay, so let's just go ahead and name this layer Sky, just to stay a little bit organized here. And let's go ahead and start giving a magenta tint to that sky. Now you'll notice it's doing a global change right now. It's doing the whole image because I duplicated the entire image. You can't really just duplicate the sky unless you mask it out. So I'm just looking at the sky right now, and I want to add a little bit more warmth. The magenta's good. And I might actually take the highlights up a little bit because I want that sun to burn out just slightly. I don't want there to be that much detail in it. So I'm going to take the whites up a little bit too. There we go. Not too much. I want to preserve the detail. Maybe even take those highlights back down a little bit. Add a little bit more contrast. And again, I'm just paying attention to the sky. I don't really care what's happening to the rest of the image at this point. Add a little bit more dehaze. Okay, maybe something like that. We can start with that. And so how can we get it to just be the sky and not everything else? Well, it's real simple. We just take a masking tool, and we have to take the next 3 hours, and we just kind of draw shapes around these legs. And no, I'm just kidding. It's actually really easy. So you just create a mask on this sky layer, and you just hit the Lumen button, and that creates a luminosity mask. How crazy is that? One click, and it's just done. And if you want to tweak the luminosity mask, you just hit View here, and you can view it in a grayscale. And as you know, for masking, same with luminosity mask, white is what's being affected, and black is what's being hidden. So white, everywhere that's white and kind of gray is where the effect is being applied. So we can actually tweak this. So let me bring the levels up here, and I want to make the sky pretty much all affected. I want that magenta tone in the sky, and then I can kind of crank this down a little bit. I don't want it as much in the sand, at all in the sand. And you see how some of the waves, some of like the highlighted bits of the water are being affected, kind of white? I'm okay with that because obviously it makes sense that in Mother Nature, in real life, the sky, the magenta in the sky is going to reflect on the magenta in the water. So I'm okay keeping it on those little highlights. But you can see now the pier, all the legs in the pier, all the people standing on the pier, and the sand and everything in between is all masked out just by me tweaking that luminosity mask. So if we go back to view now and we get out of this, look at that. It's perfect. The ocean and the water are that perfect little subtle emerald color. The sand is nice and white and gray, and we didn't add a magenta cast to the whole image. We just added that nice magenta cast to the sky. And honestly, I think it's a little bit too magenta. So what's great is now that we have this luminosity mask and we've kind of put the sky on its own layer here, I can just make these tweaks for the sky. So I can come down here to saturation and kind of peg that down a little bit because I still think I went a little bit too far. So there you go. Something like that looks nice. And here's what I want to show you next. This is the best part. I won't say the best because they've done a lot of good things, but here's the coolest thing. So instead of having to go to a different effects module, okay, like you would in the past, it was over here on this bar to the right. I can just go to the effects tab, super simple, add a filter, and look at this whole new look they have for effects. So nice. It's this nice like matte black background where all the effects are nicely and organized and nicely listed out here for you. And then you can see the little tiny box to the right. As you hover over an effect, it gives you a quick before and after preview of what each effect is going to do to your image when you apply it. How Cool as that. And what's really cool is if you pay attention here, look at some of the text here to the right that the effect has under it, where it says keywords. They've actually attached keywords to each effect so that you can search here with effects. You can add kind of a general term, and then it will pick up on those keywords, and it will direct you to the closest effect that you're looking for. So for example, I don't see an effect here that says Orton, right? Like Orton effect. But if I just type in the search box, Orton, boom, it finds the glow effect for me. And you can see in the keywords here to the right, it says blur, creative, Orton, soft focus. It kind of generalizes everything so I don't have to be so specific in the search bar. So if I just click glow here, because I do want to add a glow filter, okay, I'm just watching how it affects things because I want, I want a little bit more contrast there in the water. Okay, the glow looks nice. So let's do that. I think that looks pretty nice. We'll just leave it at that. It's a little bit of an Orton effect. It kind of makes the water nice and soft. Okay, and then let's go ahead and hop back in to another effect. And I'm going to find one of my favorites here, which is dynamic contrast. And that's going to kind of chisel out some of the details in the sand. I just want it in the sand. So what I'm going to do there is I'm going to leave it at its natural setting. I'm just going to do a natural dynamic contrast, and then I'm going to create a mask on the actual effect. I mean, isn't that just too cool? You don't have to worry about going into a separate layer. You can actually put a mask on the actual effect panel. So I'm going to mask that, and I will invert it so that I'm hiding it. So now the dynamic contrast has basically been hidden from the entire image, and I'm going to paint it in to just this area here in the sand, because I want, this is kind of the closest thing to the lens. So I want this to be super tack sharp, so that this is kind of the first thing, people see. I'm sure people will kind of, go through this differently with their eyes, but when they come back to the foreground, I want the foreground to be super sharp. And the dynamic contrast adds that nice texture, and it kind of forms everything, any kind of shapes or patterns, and gives a nice structure to it. There you go. So I like that. We'll do that, and maybe we'll take the opacity down a little bit so it's not so harsh, about 75%. Okay, I'm happy with that. So now, again, instead of having to wait for an image to render and do whatever, we can just hop right back into develop and continue doing this. And I think the next thing I want to do here is, let's see, let's create a local adjustment. And instead of burning, let's do some dodging. Let's take the exposure up a little bit, and let's take the whites up a little bit. Okay, something like this. And basically what I'm doing is I'm going to dodge the white caps of the waves. I don't know, I can't stand gray waves, like gray whites. I like my whites to be bright whites. So we're just going to take this brush, and this might be too bright, and we can always change that later. And I'm just going to roll right over the waves here. Now I could do this a million different ways. I could actually put a mask on this effect and make it a luminosity mask, and just kind of highlight the waves here. But there's not a ton of these little waves, so I'm just going to do it by hand. It's not a big deal. And I think we can agree already that adding that little bright white filter here, this local adjustment to the waves, it just adds something. And I don't know, it's nice. It's subtle, but it's adding some contrast because it's making the caps, the white caps here, bright white, and so it kind of automatically makes your eyes think the waves and the water is a little darker because we're making this brighter, so it's making everything else seem darker, therefore adding contrast. Okay, so I like that. That's nice. Let's play around with the opacity a little bit, kind of blend it in a little better. And here's a before and after on that. So it's before, after, before, and after. And there you go. I think that just added everything. Honestly, I think we're about done. Let's go back to this base layer here into develop, and let's see if there's a couple more things. Let's see. We can go to details. Do I want to add sharpening? I don't know. This image was pretty sharp right out of camera. Let's see. Sure, why not? We'll sharpen it, say 50%. Okay, something like that. And we'll close the details pane. I don't see any noise. Let's go to tone and color again, and let's maybe add just a little bit of warmth. Oh, see, that's already too much. I gotta be careful because I don't want to take that nice emerald color out of the waves, but I want it to be just a little bit less cool. Something like that. Maybe we can add a little bit of pink. Just A little bit of a pink hue, but nothing like we did in the sky, just a little bit. There we go. And then some more contrast wouldn't hurt. I kind of like this to be kind of a dark and moody scene. Let's take the exposure down. Something like that. Okay. I think that looks about good. I don't know, maybe we could punch up the vibrance a little bit so we can get a little bit more out of the pinks. And I'm pretty happy with that. I mean, obviously, you know, we could all spend a little bit more time on the photos and go crazy, but that's nice and subtle. It's a nice little scene to look at, a nice little beach sunset, and I love it. I don't know, I love the new On1 Photo RAW layout. It's so quick. So anyway, this was just to kind of showcase the layout and really show you guys how much more tidy and clean and crisp and just fast the new layout is. The performance is fast. The tabs and panels where they put the new develop effects and local adjustments and all that together is so fast. And the best part about it to me is that you have your layers sitting right there above all of your tabs. So no matter what I'm doing, the whole time I can see my layers. I'm never having to move away from my layers module. It's just, they're just always right there. I can keep duplicating and making adjustments with layers, and then I can target just a specific layer and make a local adjustment or add an effect to it. I mean, it's endless and it's all non-destructive. So well done, On1. I'm sold. I love On1 Photo RAW 2019, and it's just going to keep getting better and better. So I love it. I think they did a great job. If you guys want to check out more details and kind of my big my top 3 favorite features, and if you want a full list of all the features, there is a blog post that I wrote over on my blog at findingmiddleearth.com. It'll be the first link in the description. So check that out. That'll have a link to the product page. It'll tell you how you can sign up for the trial of this and all that stuff. So that'll all be on the blog post, but just want to give you guys a quick little YouTube video about it so you can see it's just great. The new layout's great. The new way to search for effects is great. I love that they broke down all the walls. There's no more modules. It's just all together. And of course, the image rendering engine. As long as that keeps getting sharper, I'm a happy man. And it's really sharp now. So anyway, well done, On1. Thank you guys so much for watching. And as always, see you guys in the next one.